Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. My name is Ryan Dividock, and I work for Oakland County Economic Development. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our next installment of Virtual Planners Gathering Workshops, which we host. I'd like to thank County Executive David Coulter and our administration for their support. I'd also like to thank Planning and Zoning Land Use staff, Jim Schaefer, Scott Cree, and Mike Woods for helping to coordinate and pull this workshop together. Today's topic is focused on the evolving commercial office space market during the pandemic. Today we have a well-rounded audience consisting of economic development practitioners, planning professionals from a number of communities across and even beyond Oakland County. Just a few reminders before we get started. The meeting is being recorded, so please mute your audio and turn off your camera for now. And I encourage you to use the chat box to ask any questions during the presentations. We're going to ask to hold any questions to the end. We'll monitor that chat after all of our speakers have had a chance to present, and then we'll open it up to the audience for additional questions and answers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jim Schaefer, who will be facilitating our discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan, and good morning, everybody. Today, the general discussion is going to key in on the commercial and office markets in Southeast Michigan, and more particularly Oakland County, with an eye towards the pandemic and what the impact has been on those two markets. So we're going to be focusing in on what are the primary factors that are impacting commercial and industrial right now. And from our panelists' perspectives, do you see them continuing? What are those market trends, vacancy rates, new construction, and so on? And then what impacts are we seeing locally? What are the anticipated impacts on local tax revenue and the possibility of land use conversions? Next slide, Ryan. I'm pleased to welcome our three guest speakers today. Shun Liu, who is the Director of Research and Data Analysis at the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. Matt Farrell, who is the CEO and owner of Team Core in Auburn Hills. And Terry Crode, who is the Director of Planning in the city of Southfield. So without further ado, Shun, why don't you go ahead and share your screen and take it away. You're muted there, Shun.
I think I should know that already, right? Thank you, Jim, and good morning, everyone. Really thanks, Jim, for the invitation and that nice introduction. It's an honor to join this panel and have a conversation with everyone on some very important planning issues today. So let me share my screen right now. All right.
Looks good, Shun.
Good, thanks. Speaking of conversations, SEMCOG started a new future of Southeast Michigan initiative last summer. It's an ongoing effort to take a closer look at the effects of the COVID. For each topic, we tried to assess what we knew before the pandemic, in what way COVID has changed or accelerated recent trends, and hope to help develop strategies and policies to prepare for the future. So the topics we had included transportation, parks and recreation, water infrastructure, government operations, healthcare, broadband, remote work, and education, as well as commercial office buildings. And for that, we had some productive meetings with communities based on data analysis, survey research, and observations in the region. We have a database in SEMCOG that has all the 1.7 million buildings in the region. Here is a part of the 3D model of that database. It shows the downtown Detroit, of course, and the red buildings are office and retail buildings, which are the focus of this discussion. And here is a portion of Oakland County. We can see Woodward Avenue, Birmingham, Big Beaver Road, and Troy, and so on and so forth. So in addition to the location of footprints of these buildings, the database has attributes like building types, square footage, number of stories, number of housing units, if there's a residential component of it. And also when the buildings were built, demolished, or rebuilt. It helps us to understand the history, trends, and development changes over time. For example, here we summarized building changes by type in the last decade. New constructions are in green, demolitions in red, and net change in blue. So we can see from left to right on this chart, school buildings, retail stores, and offices demolished since 2010 has exceeded the number of new buildings constructed. But warehouses, medical facilities, assisted living, and eating and drinking places, the construction outpaced demolition. So these changes were driven by supply and demand, other economic conditions, demographics, and our lifestyle changes, such as the growth of the e-commerce and the aging of population. And using the year built data in the database, we see here from the blue line that construction of new office floor space dropped significantly since 2001 and leveled out to about an average of 300,000 square feet per year in the last decade. Retail development in orange also experienced significant drop during the Great Recession, and then leveling in 2013, averaged about 1.5 million square feet per year in the last decade in the Semcon region. So those were the data before COVID, and also before the COVID, we knew that work from home had been rising, but numbers were small and growth was slow. So in 2010, about 3.1 of our region's workers worked from home. That grew continuously, steadily to about 4.5% in 2019, according to American Community Survey. Still not that much. COVID really changed that. By the summer of 2020, 54% or more than half of our region's workers were working from home. But as workers have been gradually returning to workplace, that number has decreased. The most recent data from Census Bureau's Household Pulse survey showed 28% last month in our region. Clearly, share of work from home varies greatly by industry and occupation as well. Many more workers work from home in information technology than, say, in manufacturing, both in the past and in the anticipated future. Other industries with high percentage of work from home include professional technical services, finance, insurance, and other services industries. So mostly our office workers. Meanwhile, not surprising at all, the change of how we shop also accelerated. US e-commerce sales has been increasing about 15% per year, while total retail sales increasing about 5% per year. But e-commerce sales increased over 30% in 2020. As a result, about 15% of total retail sales were through internet, the highest level ever recorded. So what happened in the last 2 years, including the 15% share of e-commerce sales and the 20 to 30% of workers working at home, is accelerating many changes and really redefining our relationship with office and retail space. Here are some recent real estate demand and supply data from one data source. Office vacancy increased in the last 2 years from under 15% to nearly 18% in Metro Detroit. Net absorption have been negative for the last 2 years. And year over year rent went down last year, which is different from the pre-pandemic trends. For retail, vacancy rate was high in 2020, but improved in 2021, although still higher than pre-pandemic levels. Rent has been mostly flat in the last 2 years compared to the larger increases before the COVID. We haven't seen significant impact on taxable value yet. If and when it happens, it may affect some communities more than others, particularly for places with higher concentration of offices or retail properties. Region-wide, office accounts for 3.4% of total taxable value. Oakland County has a higher share of office properties, as we can see on this orange map. Places like Southfield has 20%. For retail, regional average is 4.5%. Places like Auburn Hills, Madison Heights has over 10%, for example. So what does it mean for the future? Basically, what will stick with us when we get to the other side of the pandemic, whenever that happens? There are many uncertainties, but we're learning things from our community conversations, analysis, and also survey research projects. Last year, a survey from business leaders for Michigan found that 62% of the companies expected to keep their real estate footprint about the same over 6 months to a year period, but 27% plan to reduce their footprint, yet 8% anticipated increasing footprint, at least that's in part because of more square feet probably needed per worker in the future for health reasons. A PricewaterhouseCoopers survey shows that more than half of the companies believe their company is moving towards a hybrid office. Remote work is typically more important to young workers and new talent than older generation. That has future implications as well. The majority of the companies surveyed were expecting to change their real estate strategies. 61% wanted to consolidate space, yet others were considering opening satellite offices in some strategic locations. So other surveys found many people may visit fewer retail stores, and meanwhile, demand for modern warehousing and distribution centers is really high. So flexibility came up again and again in our conversations, adapting to the growing demand in flexibility in offices, retail stores, and other properties, probably the number one priority going forward. Office is no longer just a workplace. It's really a social and cultural space So visionary planning design practice is really required as we're working on future planning. And this is definitely not just about office and retail space. It's related to many other aspects of planning. For example, increasing demand in residential development, redevelopment. We heard loud and clear that increasing affordability and equity is critical. With that, I'll pass it back to Jim. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yun. Appreciate that. And next up, we'll have Matt Farrell speak to the issue regarding commercial and industrial from the real estate and development perspective. Go ahead, Matt.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yes. Yep. Looks good.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for your time. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to speak to you this morning. I am the CEO of Team Core. We specialize in property management and commercial consulting in the office, industrial, retail, and technology space, vastly here in Southeast Michigan, but we do serve corporate clients throughout the country on site selection, lease negotiations, or what we'll call consulting right sizing of their needs. When we look at Southeast Michigan and specifically Oakland County, this is the county that we all work within and serve, and we're headquartered here in Auburn Hills. But I bring the map up to reference a couple of things. Almost everything we do in the office and retail sector is disciplined around logistics, access to homes, access to quality schools, access to lifestyle. And South Michigan has some long-standing 100-year plus trends that aren't likely to change in the near future. And that reference is your high rent district is Woodward Corridor coming up through the center of Oakland County into the lakes area for quality of life, quality schools, and the like. You have 75 corridor running north-south. You have the east-west 696 corridor that splits the opposite side. One unique thing is grabbing staff members, people, workers, employees, and navigating from the southwest to the northeast continues and always has been a little bit of a challenge. So when companies are coming into Michigan to have one service location to service their discipline, they typically and historically have nestled themselves in Southfield, Royal Oak, or in the last 5, 6, 7 years, they've considered Detroit in the resurgence of the Detroit market to serve Southeast Michigan. But when they really want to penetrate the demographic, they typically do 2 locations. They'll do one up the 75 corridor in Troy, Rochester, Auburn Hills, and another one on the east-west corridor heading out towards Farmington, Novi, or Wixom. So I bring that up just as a reference. And obviously many of us here on the call today have probably used the Oakland County GIS system. We as a practitioner use this on a daily basis to identify properties, legal descriptions, taxable revenue, so on and so forth. But today I want to jump into a quick, deep analytical dive on the industrial, retail, multifamily, and office market. And with that, we have prepared some quick analytics to dive through, but I'm only going to focus on a couple key markets. And the reason is there's a lot of participants on this call, and there's a lot of areas of Oakland County to touch. So I do welcome any of the participants after this. Feel free to reach out to our office at any time. We'd be honored to come to you or have you come to us and sit down and do a deep dive and get outside the proverbial box to look at your specific market or your specific neighborhood. And we have the resources to look at all commercial aspects and all residential aspects with our licensing, and we have those subscriptions as well. So today, I'd like to first start with industrial Wixom. So when I click on this box and identifies the West 96 corridor, you can see it then highlights on the right side of the screen, Central 96. That area of industrial is 34 million square feet. There's been a fairly significant increase in overall product by 1.6 million. A lot of that is Magna and other major developments along South Lyon and through Wixom. There is a decreasing vacancy rate down to 4.1%, and the rental rates are increasing. So when you look at those stats on the right, if you look at the arrow down and the arrow up, it's a really quick way to look at which way are we trending. We're going downward or upward. In the industrial market, in the 96 corridor, the vacancies are trending downward, the rental rates are trending upward, And that's consistent with what most people feel and believe right now, that the industrial market at large is doing relatively well and stronger than it has been historically for a long time. As a contrary to that, let me look at Auburn Hills. So this is Auburn Hills, Pontiac, Rochester, 54 million square feet. The under construction is downward trending. A lot of that is because the Auburn Hills market is substantially built out, where South Lyon still has a fair amount of green pasture to work with. The vacancy rate is slightly increasing at 4.6, and the rental rates are still climbing at an average of 8.89. As a reference, 12 years ago, that 8.89 was somewhere in the 6.15 range. So there's been a significant rental growth post the recessionary times coming out of October of 08 to current day 14 years ago. So that's a good stat on the upward trend. On a smaller scale, let's take a quick look at Royal Oak. So Royal Oak, smaller market, dated market with some more dated inventory, but fully built out in most cases. 15.9 million square feet, no new inventory being added to the marketplace at the present time of substance, but the absorption is absorbing, and it's got a slightly rising vacancy, but at a very, very low vacancy of 2.2%, and a climbing rental rate at 7.74. What does that tell us? That tells us that the smaller, more dated properties have been absorbed, taken on by users and practitioners and investors who are trying to serve a smaller user place marketplace, and it's a larger market to serve the smaller consumer. Where the bigger properties, the bigger projects, the bigger warehouses, obviously the user group is much smaller. So it's a smaller field of prospect. When I shift over to retail, let's touch retail for just a second. I'm only going to highlight two markets. Let's start with Troy, Michigan. Troy's obviously known as a good retail market with not only Oakland Mall, but Somerset Mall and all the retail and restaurants around it. When we look at Troy retail market, it's 1.2 million square feet with a negative just under 12,000 or over 12,000 square foot absorption and a raising vacancy rate of 5.9, but the rental rates are still increasing. And the question is, why is the rental rate still going upward slightly? Rental rate protection is largely due to increase of construction cost, because landlords trying to secure a tenant or buildings trying to renovate spaces to fill a tenant and put tenant in space, the cost of putting them in there has increased so much over the last few years that they've really been trying to do everything they can to preserve the rental rate to justify the increased cost of putting them in. When we come down as a contrary to that and look at the Novi market, 12 Oaks Mall and all the retail in the Novi area, you've got 14 million square feet, a falling vacancy rate of 4.4, and still an increasing rental rate of 21.96 on a triple net basis. The next category to touch point real quick is multifamily. So multifamily, you've got a lot of communities here in Southeast Michigan and specifically in Oakland County that are successful, sought after, and respected. But if I touch point on a couple of those, Southfield has 12,000 apartment units. They have a slight negative absorption at the present time. They have a slightly increasing vacancy rate at 4.5, but the rental rates continue to climb. What's driving that? Home ownership, job flexibility, millennial desire to not necessarily own off the bat and wanting to rent and have flexibility in job and employment. A lot of those trends are continuing the rental growth. And you've probably read and heard another category that surfaced the last few years called SFR, that's single family rentals. Single family rental categories, not as much in Southeast Michigan, but throughout the country have been a very large growing category where a lot of families and users and business people are choosing to rent single family homes versus buying and putting a 30-year mortgage on the property. So that is a growing trend, but it's definitely not a majority. It's a minority group, but it is a growing trend. If I transition this over to Rochester and Troy multifamily, you've got 17,000 units, of which 440 units currently under construction. A vacancy rate is climbing slightly at 7.1, but the rental rates are still on the rise. In Farmington Hills, we'll look at one more, 17 vacancy rates are reducing down to 3.2. Rental rates are still climbing. So now I want to take a couple extra minutes and dive into an ever and more important category right now is office. So the office market, let's look at two of our largest. Southfield, Michigan is 23.5 million square feet. We have a negative net absorption last 12 months of 326,000 feet. We have an increasing vacancy rate to 18.2 and a decreasing rental rate of 18.35. As a cross, that's along the east-west 696 corridor. Now let's come up to Troy, which is a very comparable and competitive market for office. And you've got inventory in Troy of about 5.5 million square feet, especially when you take out the Kmart headquarters. You have a raising vacancy rate of 17% and a decreasing rental rate. But let me dive a little deeper into this one for a second. And when pulling up the stats, trends that we're seeing and feeling every day from office tenants and retail tenants, but mostly office, is they are at a fairly rapid clip putting space back on the market through subleasing. If they went through PPP1, PPP2, maybe some other level of EDIL or other loans or incentives to protect themselves, those have been spent and expired. And now it's into what is the new norm? Where are we going at this point going forward? Are we requiring our people to come back or not? And a lot of companies coming up on lease maturities are choosing to either move out early, sublease the space, try to recover some of that liability, or in a lot of cases downsizing and trying to restructure. But they are looking for quality and unique spaces where they can attract their employees to come back to the work environment. So that is a trend. And when we look at the vacancy rate, here we are back in first quarter of 2000, as right after 9/11, we went into a single state recession for the duration of the period right up until the market crash in October of 08. But after the market crash of 08, we became a very attractive buy in this market, where national and international money and investors and corporations were coming into Michigan marketplace because we had gone through a fairly meaningful reset. And that drove this vacancy drop and a fair amount of population growth. We're now starting to trend back upward on this vacancy tier. So we peaked out around in the office sector of Troy, Michigan, at 33 to almost 34%. We came back down to 10.83, and now we're climbing back up to about 17. So having laid that out, one of the key factors is predictions. What are we seeing as trending in these equations? And that is there is an industrial positive in that we're onshoring manufacturing more so than we have in 50 plus years. We are seeing a revolution in the auto sector with EV changing the marketplace almost daily. And the auto sector has to be 3 to 4 years out ahead of that. So the supplier base who is designing the future vehicle, designing the future EV, they're out there making commitments, buying buildings, renovating properties, moving things in, and trying to utilize space to get ahead of that industry. It's not driven by real estate. Real estate is the use to get to the means, if you will. The retail sector, we're seeing a tale of two stories. We're seeing merchandising retailers, i.e. your closed malls or merchandise sales, struggling because the pandemic, as you heard earlier in the presentation, the pandemic accelerated certain trends. Amazon shipped to your door, and now work from home, where that's the easiest, most convenient thing. That has accelerated the challenges for the retail sector, for merchandisers and the malls. On the flip side, the small strip centers with fast casual dining and carry out and food services maintain to do very, very well and staying in fairly strong occupancy. So that is a good sign and a positive. The multifamily market, we continue to see raising demand. There's raising demand in the market for multifamily. There's raising revenues, raising costs, raising rents. The office market continues to just be a big question mark, because had we gone back to market on the first phase of the pandemic, I would like to think we'd be at 60 to 70% utilization today. Unfortunately, we went into a phase 4, a phase 3, and a phase 4, and it prolonged the recovery. And in that prolonged recovery, a lot of companies decided, well, we've gotten through 2 years. Do we really need to take on this expense again? Or is this something that culturally we're going to inherit and we're going to start allowing more work from home into perpetuity or into long-term commitments? So there's a very large cultural shift. But the problem is the big it's almost gone beyond a health concern, and it's really starting to become, in every one of our conversations with customers, it's a labor fight. So for instance, GM, Chrysler, Ford, or suppliers or accounting firms, you name it, they are fighting for talent. They have jobs to fill. They want the best talent at that job. The problem is, if they come down and dictate that they want their people back in and mandate them 5 days a week, as it was for 50 to 100 years, and require them back in, those staff members are taking the left door and exiting, looking for that work time flex and remote capabilities, because the stakeholders and employers want them in for accountability in most cases. The employees would prefer to have flexibility and life balance and work off site if they have the opportunity or the luxury to do so. So it's really a cultural and a labor fight that's driving a lot of these trends at the present time. The thing that keeps us up at night, though, is when we specifically talk about the office market, is the cause and effect to debt and the financial challenges with office. So, for instance, almost 50% of this country's office space resides in just under 10 major MSA markets. And most of you know most of what those are: Seattle, Chicago, New York, New Jersey, Atlanta, Miami, San Francisco. So you add them up, Dallas, Texas. So you add those up and look at it, and almost every office property over about a $3 million valuation. Almost all of those, vast majority of a $3 million valuation or plus, and this includes Southeast Michigan, are typically levered, and they have mortgage debt on those properties. And that mortgage debt is typically at that price point pushed into what we call a CMBS market, which is a commercial mortgage-backed security market, or it's in the life company, life co market, which is life insurance backed. And it's the actuarials and the performance of those mortgages that supply a return on investment to the stakeholders of that debt. So as office starts to shrink and utilization starts to shrink, ultimately resulting in some financial performance of those properties, the big fear is, what does this bubble look like, and how do we get out ahead of that bubble to try and insulate ourselves away from a greater risk that might be brewing behind the scenes? Couple of ideas our team and I continue to talk about it with many of our municipalities or corporate clients or other customers and high net worth individuals that own properties is, what would help you protect and serve to get to the other side of recovery? What allows you to get through this next 2, 3, even 5-year period to a point of stability and new predictability? Because the market is somewhat unpredictable for office right now. And the reoccurring theme is tax relief or tax deferral, or municipalities coming forth with ideas and funding programs, or the federal government to allow some real estate property tax, both on retail and office, the two most challenged categories, to have an ability to survive the recovery and come out the other side. Because I think what we all would like to see is not repeating what we did in 8-9, where we had extreme foreclosure bankruptcy categories. 3 things to keep in mind as you look at your pulse of your backyard and your market that we look at every day for our customers is, number 1, population. Population needs drive sensible decisions around real estate, whether it's houses, multifamily, industrial, or retail, or office. So knowing the trend of where the population trends are going throughout the United States and in our market is a key factor. We're sitting at about 2% growth right now, but it wasn't that long ago. That was at 0.04. So we are trending upward with growth, which is a great sign. But in theory, if it's at a 0 and we're building new product, we're really playing a little bit of musical chairs. We're playing musical chairs in houses, in offices, in industrial, you name it, and moving just for something changed or something new. But down line, there's something that may not get resat in. Somebody may not pick up that property, and that goes into the functionally obsolete category and likely for redevelopment or reutilization. The other thing to keep in mind here in Southeast Michigan and all over, but mortgage rates. And the reason why I say mortgage rates is because we are privileged with the opportunity to house Quicken Loans and United Wholesale Mortgage in Southeast Michigan, who are 2 of the largest mortgage providers in the United States. And they also employ upwards of 25,000 people combined. That's a large chunk of employee base that is almost reliant on their ability to produce with competitive interest rates when it comes to home mortgages. So we keep an eye on that as it relates to trending and how it affects the marketplace and down on the street. The last item, and most of us know in this marketplace, is this market goes as the auto sector goes. And the auto market is going through a renaissance right now with EV and change. Some are in support, some are not in support. At the end of the day, it is a revolution, it's happening. And auto sales does drive a lot of either conviction, confidence, or market predictability. But I would encourage each and every one of us, in protection of your communities, to try to stay open-minded and creative and get outside the box to help encourage work-life balance and flex return to work schedules. Because if the majority of the marketplace decides that they don't ever want to go back to office space, we have some very, very difficult challenges ahead of us that are going to be difficult to overcome without some bold enhancements. And with that, thank you very much. And we'll open to questions afterward, but I'll turn the presentation back over.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Matt. Excellent presentation. And now we'll go ahead and turn it over to Terry. Terry, go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank Oakland County for putting this together. Okay, here we go. So just a little bit about Southfield pre-COVID. We have a residential population of approximately 78,000 people, which grew to 175,000 daytime population. And we had recovered from the Great Recession to higher occupancy rates just before the COVID office pandemic affected our office market. With regards to trends, we're in the process of updating our master plan. These are some of the trends that I saw. I also want to thank Shelley Freeman, our Business and Economic Development Manager, and Justin Prybilski, our City Assessor, who also provided some of these trends to share with you today. As many of my co-speakers have discussed prior, the pandemic has accelerated trends that currently existed pre-COVID-19. As you know, technology is allowing people to work remotely from anywhere. Working from home or working as digital nomads means more flexibility, eliminated commutes, increased time with family and friends, work-life balance considerations, shifted priorities. One of the trends that I'm also discovered is a 3-2-2 model, 3 days in the office, 2 days at home and 2 days off. In many cases, companies are increasing wages to retain and attract employees and talent. We're hearing roughly a reduction in office space and leases of a quarter to a third. And companies that are not willing to provide certain perks in the post-COVID world will have a hard time finding competitive employees. According to LinkedIn, 6 in 10 workers had gone through a career awakening. Business needs to step up to support current and future employees and their families. Tenant space size, competitive renter rates, and flexible lease terms are important. We're still seeing supply chain challenges continue with products, transportation, construction material, and costs. Housing market shortages also, as one of the presenters alluded to, has increased the demand for existing homes and higher rental rates as well. And then finally, the Great Resignation, record high wave of people quitting their jobs, taking a pause or switching career and jobs in 2021. This is specifically important for Southfield with 23 to 27 million square feet of office. And those office workers support our retail and restaurants. These statistics were provided to us by Friedman, but basically our challenges are Southfield needs to backfill, repurpose over 6 million square feet of office. As someone alluded to, we have approximately 23.6 million square feet of office today, 26.2% available, and 20% increase since the low of 22 in available or vacant office space since 2018. And in the greater area, there's 196 million square feet of which 15.5% is available. And Southfield accounts for 12% of that total Metro Detroit office space, but Southfield has approximately 20% available. I'm just going to share a few case studies. We're seeing a significant trend in developers asking us to repurpose vacant or underutilized Class C office space. One that happened pre-pandemic but continued to evolve is Arbor Lofts, which was approximately 117,000 square feet of office and was about 90% vacant. They repurposed to mostly housing. I believe they have 171 units that have maintained above 90% occupancy rate. And recently, they've taken that excessive parking that was developed in the 60s and 70s for office workers and is starting to do infill development with townhomes and residential development. And here's a concept plan with the existing office building in the center and proposed townhouses along Civic Center to your left and multifamily on the north side to your right. And providing amenities such as dog parks to help attract and retain future tenants. The apartment market is very strong. We're seeing in the last 2 years, I've seen half a dozen to a dozen repurposing of office, hotel into multifamily residential. Good reason is Southfield is the center of it all, and we have good access to other employment centers. Another office conversion that recently went through the planning and council is Class C office building located on Southfield Road, just north of 12 Mile. It was functionally obsolete, one-story building. And we have a proposal for a tear down, a 4-story internal storage unit with retail on the first floor. And these are some of the concept renderings that were approved. There is some pushback from our elected officials on this redevelopment, but if you drill down to the numbers, the current market value is 1.3 million with a taxable value of 638,000 and an annual taxes collected about 42,000. But the proposed multi-use storage, the market value would increase to 5.6 million with a taxable value of about 2.8 million and annual taxes going up almost 4-fold. This is another example from Friedman Real Estate. This is just in the discussion purposes at this point, but it's, they're asking us to consider rezoning from existing office building to provide mixed use retail and services with climate controlled self-storage. This is the existing office complex with 128,000 square feet. It's 100% vacant and it's located on just over 11 acres. And here's one of the concepts for redevelopment where the existing building would be converted to internal storage with possibly some office or retail on the first floor and 2 out parcel developments from medical to retail to a hotel, possibly a daycare. The current market value is about 4.1, generating about $136,000 in taxes. The repurposed development increases to 4.1 million with annual taxes of 271. So almost a doubling in the tax base. Another successful conversion is Sun Communities Research Center, 130,000 square feet office converted to showroom. Prior to the redevelopment, it sat at about 17% occupied. Currently, it's 100% occupied. They opened up the space, created a 2-story interior space for showroom of glamping shelters. These are some concept photos of before and after. And then these are some of the luxurious glamping that is provided, and they bring tours into this facility for future sales. So some final observations and trends. Struggling businesses have closed in line with national trends. Office conversion, especially Class C to storage, religious institutions, housing, retail showrooms, R&D, and last mile logistics centers and dark stores. We're seeing a trend to that. We're getting a lot of requests that are not in line with our zoning. So we either have to go through rezoning, do text amendments to allow for different uses, or create overlay districts to allow some more flexibility. As I said, there's a trend of a reduction of 25 to 30% of existing leases and office space. We see increased vacancies will lead to lower rents with the effect on operating expenses, debt service, repairs and maintenance, et cetera, and ultimately affect taxes. Southfield's vacancy rate is approximately 18.3% according to CoStar, and we're seeing reduced construction activity for new offices and development. We must factor in how the reduced office workers will impact and support secondary services, such as our restaurants, retail, commercial, small business. We're looking at greater zoning flexibility to allow for more drive-throughs, walk-up windows, drop-off and pick-up areas, outdoor seating, and temporary uses. Economic development, land use, and transportation planning will be affected in yet to be determined ways. Government policies do have an effect. Mandates, repeats of shutdown will make it more difficult and expensive to do business. In 2021, the assessed value is currently 41.7% higher than the taxable value due to the Great Recession. We're worried about inflation, low labor force participation, income inequality, and a new wave of variants of COVID-19. Southfield must be fluid, adaptive, and forward-thinking, and more business-friendly with regulations. And we need to allow providers of personal service to operate outside the home, more home-based businesses within the city. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the group for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Excellent presentation. Just as a reminder for folks, if you could please go ahead and enter any questions that you have in the chat, and Ryan and Mike from staff here will field those and forward them in. Right now, we don't have any, so go ahead and populate that if you will.
Jim, I think we can open it up to the audience if they feel comfortable asking any questions over their microphone too at this time.
Sounds good. Anybody, go ahead and unmute and ask your questions.
Hi there, my name is Christia Brockley. I'm from the city of Farmington Hills. I'm the Economic Development Director. Quick question in regards to, the redevelopments and the new changes happening, excuse me, in Southfield. I was curious, what is the surrounding pattern like for the rest of the area? Because with having an office space, a lot of what office space had in the past was surrounding office space, but with having new multifamily and other alternatives going in there, what's the pattern to be foreseen, and what is it currently?
Terry, you want to take a shot at that?
What we're seeing is a kind of a hodgepodge targeting of certain office buildings that have sat on the market for vacant or underutilized for a long time. We are definitely seeing an increase in requests for self-storage. We're seeing an increase for religious institutions occupying these bigger spaces. We've seen some innovation with the Sun Community Showroom, and we're seeing requests for conversion of multifamily because that market is really hot, and single family homes, we don't have a lot of vacant space for development, but I think because of our central location, we still have a significant amount of office. multifamily market is really big. And the example I showed you with Arbor Lofts, we actually have 3 mixed use or multifamily developments within a quarter mile of that market. So we have a significant redevelopment of the former Northland Center with up to 2,000 units of residential. The retail has gone from over 1 million square feet down to a couple, tens of thousands. So there hasn't been a specific pattern surrounding some of these office buildings. They've been more of an isolated redevelopment opportunity at this point.
Matt, did you perhaps have anything to add on that?
The office market and the change of the redevelopment of property is still largely driven by the needs of the user of that property or the repositioning of that user to another suitable location. So things that come into play are marketing, signage, parking, access, condition of space. As one of the presenters said earlier, amenities are a huge factor today. Whether it's conference rooms, fitness centers, covered parking, things that give the it factor and help draw those staff members back to properties. But as for properties that have come vacant and are set for redevelopment, the question of what happens to the surrounding land use or the surrounding properties, we're really seeing it on a case-by-case basis. I can't say we've felt out a trend yet of what it's doing to neighboring properties. There hasn't been enough success stories in doing so to show a trend of what's typical. But overall, in working with the local municipal planning on what is trending, the areas trending positive are housing and multifamily, somewhat hampered by increased construction pricing right now, and increasing of industrial warehousing needs. The challenge is industrial warehousing needs often doesn't make sense financially in areas of prior office zoning where that office was neighboring residential. So there's still a gray area of how to put the 3 categories in proximity without causing negative effect to the residential community.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you for those responses. Anyone else want to unmute and go ahead and ask a question?
I have a quick question. Can you hear me? My name is Donnie Steele from Orion Township. I'm the treasurer in Orion Township. And earlier in the presentation, you discussed the possibilities of foreclosures and on some of these spaces. And I just wanted to know if there were any stats of any of these buildings around the area, if they are in distress right now. That's one question. And the other one was, you mentioned a little bit about tax incentives to help some of these properties, and I just wanted to know what that looked like as well.
This is Matt. Appreciate the question, Donnie. The distress conversation is really around the financial health and the financial performance of each individual asset or property. And when rents are falling, or when occupancy numbers are falling, as they are right now with sublease space and or terming out tenants who are not securing their future there, when we see buildings fall below 85% occupancy, we start to get concerned. And when Troy peaked out at 34% vacant, or Southfield was 34 to 36% back in the 08-09 timeline, early 10, we saw a glutton of that. Well, that was a collapse of the financial market, largely on the overfunded residential balloon that then trickled into the effect. This time around, industrial's doing great. Retail's kind of has 2 stories. Multifamily and housing is doing great, but office, being a big category and a large category nationally, is a big question mark. And the challenge there is this cultural shift. So as those properties fall below 87, 85, 82, or below 80% occupancy, and resulting rents being reduced, as one of the other speakers mentioned, upwards of maybe reduced square footage by 25-ish to 30% when renewals come up, those are compounding effects on the bottom line P&L of that property. And every mortgage has what we call a debt service coverage ratio. So they have to be collecting enough rents and revenues to cover a 1.2 to 1.3% spread. And when it falls below that, then the lenders surface and they start looking at how they can protect their investment. And then it goes to security of that mortgage. I do fear, our industry fears, other principals in the industry that we all know in the Southeast Michigan market, they're thinking about this daily of what is the cause and effect if we don't get back to a 60, 70, or 75% office utilization and the timetable to get there. So in the meantime, have we seen a lot? The answer is no. My belief on that is it will come. We probably should have seen some of it already. A lot of the lenders and banks are understaffed, overworked, and aren't organized yet to deal with the challenged assets on their books. But that's what we call the special asset groups that originate in the lending community with the banks or the servicing companies. But I do believe that we'll see some of that come. It'll likely be, as our other speaker from Southfield mentioned, from Terry, it'll be the Class C. Because the Class B tenant can now go move to a Class A environment, maybe go into smaller square footage, get increased amenities at an equal to or lesser price than they were paying previously. So there's that, they'll move up to quality at the same cost or lesser cost, but the lower cost, underutilized, underdesired, where they're going to have a hard time bringing those employees back to, those properties are going to be probably the most challenged. And those in particular are the smaller properties that are likely financed locally with more regional or local lending debt. So we do anticipate there'll be a push of repositioning assets or note sales and so on and so forth. There hasn't been a lot yet. Taxes, in my opinion, are one way that a municipal can work cooperatively with a stakeholder or stakeholders, whether those are corporations who employ people and occupy space, or whether they're investment firms that own buildings, to try and say, we really don't want to see you push the reset button. We want to work with you so we can all get through this together and get to the other side to have more predictability and know what the new norm is going to look like. So it's a tool. What does it look like? It could be deferral, it could be reductions, it could be a bereavement. There's a lot of ways to script, but Oakland County being rated and many of the municipalities on this call having good quality financials and credit rating, your borrowing capability and federal supports are at an all-time high right now. My encouragement is ask questions and go look for those solutions and create the solution in your community.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. We are coming up on 11 o'clock. We have several, I know some folks who want to talk on live, and also we have some chat questions. We will go ahead and go on an extra 10, 15 minutes to address the questions. So if there are any other questions, go ahead and unmute and ask.
Matt, sorry. Hi, Matt. This is Ingrid Ty. I'm the director of the Oakland County Economic Development Department. First off, thank you to all of our speakers for coming today. A lot of great information, and kudos to our staff. You did a great job. Matt, I wanted to just follow up that conversation. Is there an appetite at the community level, at the municipal level, or with developers on any kind of conversion with some of these high-rise office to like the top layers, the top floors into residential, into apartments or condos? That obviously requires a huge capital investment. And so I'm just curious if that's a possibility, because I think about some of our other downtown communities where they're built with first floor retail, a couple floors of office, and then residential on top. So I was just curious what your thoughts were for some of the high-rise properties, Southfield, Troy, and some of the other communities.
Ingrid, thanks for the question. It is a trend we're seeing in Chicago, New York, Atlanta, some other markets. We haven't seen it other than in a couple spots in downtown Detroit thus far here. So Southfield and Troy hasn't necessarily seen that ball come forward. But the benefit, you mentioned one of the biggest concerns and risks is what is the conversion cost to split space, make it ingress and egress capable, make it a modification for HVAC and mechanical systems to accommodate what is demanded of a renter, which is customization of your unit or of your one bedroom, 2 bedroom, or 3 bedroom unit, versus the way office buildings are historically designed and built, with a plentum-based HVAC system. So it is an expensive conversion. The benefit, though, is we are starting to see lenders, financiers, or other groups step forth to try and create these creative solutions where they know the demand exists for the apartment community growth, and it's challenged against the lack of demand in the office sector. So you can almost segment a building and say top third residential, bottom 2/3 office, and we're going to focus floors 1 and 2 on a level of convenience level mixed use retail to serve both disciplines of office and living. And so that is a trend nationally. I wouldn't say there's enough supported case studies to say how financially successful they have been. But there are quite a few projects to point to that we could start pulling forth and share of those happening and occurring throughout the country.
And I just like to piggyback. Again, that one example of Arbor Loss was a conversion. And I would say that our elected officials are much more open and receptive to conversion to multifamily than they are to storage or other uses. So we, in our larger mixed-use zoning districts, we do allow residential and office to be compatible with each other. That's what I can offer from the Southfield perspective.
Terry, I agree. This is Matt again. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And while storage is a growing demand right now, our fear is it's not a long-term sustainable demand, and that it's driven by change and quick change, not long-term desire for people to pay money and store things they don't necessarily need and use on a daily basis.
You know, and the only counterbalance to that, I generally agree, is that with a lot of home-based businesses now and a lot of the internet, they need storage place for their product. And so we've seen an increased need for that. So with more people working from home or more people leaving the job market and creating their own business, there's a greater need.
You're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
And also, you know, in the office, do you pay $18 a square foot to store stuff in an office space, or do you pay $9 or $10 in a storage facility? So those couple trends, plus the shift from large homes and all that maintenance to rental, people still have a need to store their stuff, even though they want to be more mobile. So whether that's long-term or short-term, we don't know, but I think that is pushing the demand.
Yeah.
Excellent. Can we, why don't we go ahead and take a couple of the chat questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. This one's directed to Terry. Any mixed-use development projects, retail, office, residential, that you could expound upon?
Yeah, so we're a redevelopment ready community, and we had 2 of our 3 larger vacant parcels was the former Northland Center. So that's 117 acre approved as overlay development district, similar to a PUD. And as I stated, that they're up to 2,000 apartment units. There'll be some medical office, there'll be some retail, there'll be possibly a hotel and some other accessory uses. So that's our major mixed use development. And then right across the street from City Hall complex, there was 3 office buildings that were torn down in early 2010. We've gone through a number of developers, but we do have a developer that is moving forward on the 8.25 acre mixed use development with retail, medical office, and hopefully a 4 or 5 story higher density apartment complex. And that's immediately adjacent to that Arbor Loft property that I showed. And that's an area that we're seeing also a former extended stay hotel being converted into more higher end apartments. So we do have 2 larger mixed use developments in our pretty much landlocked community.
Okay, great. I have one for Matt. It looks like you kind of attempted to address it in the chat, but do you want to expound upon, do you see an increased significant demand for shared office space and co-working spaces given the change to more hybrid work environments?
We do, and as Terry spoke earlier as well, the 3-2-2 concept or some hybrid model seems to be the prevailing desire of most corporations right now for balance of retention of staff and attraction of future staff. So the amenities, the creativity, the unique work environments, the flexibility of work environment, now that those staff members have spent the last 2 years either working in their home office, their basement, their kitchen table alongside their kids, one way or the other, everybody's normal has been disrupted and it's created this cultural shift. So now it's about creating the environment that attracts them back in and gives them a desire to come back in and be amongst their colleagues. And the benefit of that is collaboration. The benefit is trust. The benefit is mentor-mentee. You know, the most challenging side of this change right now is the future interns and our future employment scenario is getting the raw end of the stick of not getting good mentorship and training because they don't have a work environment to go work alongside their colleagues who have done the business prior in all aspects. So most employers are trying to find that shared work environment, that hybrid model, that hybrid creative space that allows them to not have to bear the financial risk on a daily basis, but allows enough attraction and creativity to bring the best talent in and keep them on board.
Excellent.
And can I just piggyback too? We don't have a traditional downtown, but we've been very focused on the pedestrian realm. We've had 21 pieces of public art installed in our city center district. We've extended our shared use pathway up to almost 8 linear miles. We have a bike share program. So again, there's the internal collaboration in innovative space, and we've been focusing on the exterior public place to, again, encourage more people to come back to the offices.
If I can jump in quickly, that mixed use and co-working space. Mixed use is no longer just different buildings next to each other or different type of use in different floors in a tall building. They're coming to one single place. One extreme example I heard is a restaurant. They open to work from home workers together there. It's not just for eating. It's basically a co-working space when it's off-peak time in those restaurants. So it's really adding amenities to these different type of spaces and making it more flexible. That's where the mixed use is going to.
Okay. Okay, we have time for one more question. There's nothing else in the chat box. Is there anyone else who wanted to jump on? We'll take one last question verbally.
Jim, this is Kevin Christensen, Economic Community Development Director of Farmington. How are you?
How you doing, Kevin?
I'm good, Jim, and thank you to Matt, to Terry. Really appreciate this today. It's excellent presentation and informationally, certainly a lot to be taken away. Question to Matt and Terry, also too, you made comment about the need for a lot of flexibility, maybe at the local level, for in conversion of space, for variances, for changing ordinance structure, some zoning ordinance amendments. I'm assuming too, maybe some master plan or long range plan adjustments too, to accommodate the change in the land use perspective. What about if there just isn't the ability to realize conversion? It's just too costly. And I don't know if you're running into situations too, where from a building code perspective, trying to make this conversion, that you can't accommodate the change because the existing construction doesn't have fire suppression or doesn't have the right barrier-free access or doesn't meet code. Is there a point, Matt, where it gets too costly and you have to look at tear down, rebuild rather than conversion?
You know, Kevin, I hate to say the answer is probably yes. And the reason is it's fairly difficult to convince a resident to go up the same elevator that office or medical patrons are going up to their residence. Right. So when you do a split use high-rise tower and that kind of a split conversion we spoke about a few minutes ago, you almost have to have that separate elevator shaft, that separate entranceway, that separate amenity security structure in place that is slightly different from what the standard office open to public is. There will be properties that it just mathematically with construction cost and or the presiding debt on the property just doesn't mathematically pencil out to convert. And they're going to do everything they can to try and survive with hopefully, knock on wood, a recovering trend. That this is a blip. It's a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year blip, and that the market is going to grow in both population and desire to re-enter the office space and hopefully go back to that. But do we anticipate that there's a fairly meaningful shrinkage of office demand into the relatively permanent future? We do. We do believe that there is that shrinking demand of 20 to 25%. We're hoping it's not greater, because that starts compounding those conflicts we were talking about.
And I'll just briefly add that it's the Class C office that it has a harder time being converted. The lower ceiling heights, the newer offices need an additional space for all the cables and networking and so forth. We do everything we can to try to prevent buildings going into landfills. The one other thing I'll just mention as a close is we have 10 to 12 vacant or underutilized school sites. So we've created a residential unit development overlay to help with repurposing those school sites and allowing for greater density of residential. Again, those are our few areas of land that we have for redevelopment. And currently we have two projects under consideration. But,
and there's a redevelopment of a hotel proposed development that's going to multifamily, where corporate service or corporate travel hotel has been a very challenged category through this pandemic, and likely will be an easy, it'll be an easy strike of a red pen by a CFO of trying to limit cost and spend corporate travel. That is probably going to be a fairly meaningful casualty of this pandemic. The conversion of that into multifamily is an opportunity. So we do see that the corporate service hotel is a very open, capable conversion, a little more so and a little bit more cost effectively than an office building in that conversion.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank our speakers, Shun, Terry, and Matt did an excellent job. A lot of very, very good information. And I do want to remind folks, and maybe Ryan, you can pop this in the chat, that the recording of this will be available on the county's website shortly, so that you can revisit this discussion. Again, I'd like to thank you. We did go a little bit over, but I think it was well worth it. And everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.